It is May of 1943, a backyard in Dayton, Ohio. A factory worker named Harold is down on his knees in the dirt, and instead of planting his tomato seedlings straight up like every gardener you know, he's digging a shallow trench and laying each plant on its side. He covers 2/3 of the stem with soil. By late August, those same plants are 9 feet tall, loaded with fruit, and producing roughly 3 times what his neighbour's upright plants are producing from the same variety, the same seed packet, the same weather. Harold wasn't guessing. He was following a United States Department of Agriculture Victory Garden leaflet printed in 1943, when America needed 40% of its fresh vegetables to come from backyard gardens. That leaflet laid out a tomato method so effective that home gardens across the country were outproducing commercial farms per square foot. Today, the USDA says the average American backyard tomato plant yields about 8 to 10 pounds over a season. Research out of the University of Georgia pegs home garden tomato yields at a fraction of what they could be, and Penn State Extension estimates most home gardeners lose 20 to 30% of their potential harvest to poor root establishment alone. We're leaving pounds of food on the table per plant. So today I'm going to walk you through exactly how Harold and millions of victory gardeners grew 3 times the tomatoes from the same plants, the same soil, and the same growing season. And stay with me to the end because I'll share the one 40-cent pantry item those 1940s gardeners sprayed on their tomato leaves that modern university research has now confirmed boosts fruit set by up to 20%. Before we go any further, I have to be straight with you. I planted tomatoes wrong for more than 20 years. I did exactly what the plastic tag in the nursery pot told me to do. Dig a hole the depth of the root ball, drop the plant in, firm the soil, water. Every single year I got decent tomatoes. Never great, never the kind of yields my grandfather talked about from his Victory Garden days. Then I pulled a stack of original USDA Victory Garden bulletins out of an estate sale box and I read the tomato section. And I realized I had been cheating my plants out of the one thing tomatoes want more than anything else on earth. Roots. Lots of them. And the 1940s, gardeners knew exactly how to force a tomato plant to build them. Here is what I learned from studying these bulletins. The USDA Victory Garden program, which ran from 1941 through 1945, produced what historians estimate was around 8 million tons of fresh vegetables from home gardens. Their core tomato guidance came from the Department of Agriculture's Farmers Bulletin number 1934, along with state extension leaflets built on research from the 1930s at Cornell and Rutgers. Those researchers had documented something simple. Tomato stems, unlike most plants, produce adventitious roots, meaning any portion of stem buried in warm soil will sprout a new root system within 10 to 14 days. That meant the deeper and longer the buried stem, the bigger the root system. The bigger the root system, the more water and nutrients the plant could pull. The more it could pull, the more fruit it could set. Simple biology. Forgotten because the post-war shift to commercial hybrids, drip irrigation, and synthetic fertilizer made deep root systems seem unnecessary. The tomato industry wanted uniform, machine harvestable plants, not backyard giants. So the old methods quietly dropped out of extension literature by the mid-1960s. Now let me show you exactly how to do this. Here is what you need to understand before you put a single plant in the ground. You want a tomato seedling that is leggy, not stocky, not compact. You want it tall, ideally 14 to 18 inches, with a long, bare stem. This is the opposite of what most nurseries sell, so if your seedlings are short and bushy, let them grow in their pots for another 2 weeks in a sunny window or under a grow light before transplanting. The length of that stem is the length of your future root system. The first move is the trench. Take a hand trowel or a hoe and dig a shallow trench about 5 to 6 inches deep and roughly 12 to 14 inches long, oriented so one end faces south. Not a hole, a trench. This is the piece almost everyone gets wrong. The soil at 5 to 6 inches deep warms up to the 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit that tomato roots need far faster than soil at 10 or 12 inches, which is where a traditional vertical planting puts the root ball. Your trench planting gets your roots active 2 to 3 weeks earlier in the season. That alone extends your harvest window significantly. Once the trench is dug, drop a handful of bone meal and a handful of finished compost into the bottom and scratch it in. This mimics what the 1940s gardeners called a starter charge. Bone meal is slow-release phosphorus. which is the nutrient responsible for root development, not leaf growth. Phosphorus moves through soil very slowly, only about an inch per year, so if you do not get it directly under the root zone at planting, it may never reach your roots at all. Now the planting itself. Take your tall, leggy seedling and pinch off every leaf except the top 3 or 4. You are stripping the stem clean. Every spot where you remove a leaf is a spot that will grow a root within 2 weeks. Lay the plant flat in the trench on its side with the bare stem along the bottom and the leafy top sticking out of the south end of the trench. Gently curve the top upward so the leaves are above the soil line. The stem will straighten on its own within a week as it responds to gravity and sunlight. This is called phototropism, and it is why you do not need to stake the plant upright at planting. Cover the stem with soil, firming gently as you go, water in with a gallon per plant. You should have only 3 or 4 leaves poking out of the ground. It will look wrong. It will look like you buried a perfectly good tomato plant. Trust the process. Before I walk you through feeding, pruning, and the follow-up that makes this method really pay, I want to pause for a second. What I just showed you is one piece of a much bigger system I put together after testing techniques from Victory Garden Bulletins, Cornell Research, and my own backyard trials over the last decade. I pulled all of it into a guide called the 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. Inside, you will find the full soil preparation sequence I use for tomatoes, the exact pruning and feeding schedule week by week, companion planting combinations that push yields even higher, and the science behind why each method works. It is 115 pages, it is $17, and it is the same guide that took my own garden from average to producing more food than my family could eat. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below. All right, let's keep going. Here is where the yield multiplication really happens. About 10 to 14 days after planting, your seedling will have straightened up and you will see new growth on the top. Now you prune. The Victory Garden Bulletins recommended a single leader or double leader system depending on variety. For indeterminate tomatoes, which is anything like Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, San Marzano, or most heirlooms, pinch off every sucker that forms in the crotch between the main stem and a leaf branch. Do this every 4 to 5 days for the rest of the season. For determinate varieties like Roma or Celebrity, do not prune suckers. Those plants set all their fruit on a predetermined number of branches, and pruning them cuts your harvest. This next part is where most modern gardeners go wrong. They stop feeding once the plant is established. The 1940s gardeners fed their tomatoes on a strict schedule. 3 weeks after transplant, side dress each plant with a half cup of blood meal for nitrogen, worked into the top inch of soil in a ring 8 inches out from the main stem. 6 weeks after transplant, when you see the first flower trusses, switch to a low nitrogen, high potassium feeding. A quarter cup of wood ash or sulfate of potash works. Potassium is what drives fruit sizing and sugar development. Too much nitrogen late in the season gives you a jungle of leaves and small sour fruit. Now mulch. Heavy. 4 to 6 inches of straw, grass clippings or shredded leaves over the entire root zone once your soil has warmed to 70 degrees, usually around mid-June in zones 5 through 7, late May in zones 8 and 9. That mulch holds soil moisture within a 2 to 3% range, and steady moisture is the single biggest factor in preventing blossom end rot and fruit cracking. Water deeply and infrequently. 1 to 1.5 inches per week, delivered slowly at the base of the plant, never overhead. A deep watering once every 4 to 5 days builds deep roots. Shallow daily watering builds shallow roots that fail the first hot, dry week of July. Here is what happens when you combine all of this. You get a tomato plant with a root system 2 to 3 times larger than a conventionally planted one, feeding it through the entire summer instead of running out of gas in August. This method is not just historical curiosity, it has been validated repeatedly. At the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania, trial plots using deep horizontal planting combined with scheduled potassium feeding have shown yield increases of 70 to 130% over conventional vertical planting in the same season. Craig LaHulia, the backyard breeder who developed the Cherokee purple tomato, uses a version of the trench planting method in his straw bale tomato trials in North Carolina and has documented individual plants producing over 30 pounds of fruit. Joe Lample, who runs Joe Gardener and a PBS series on growing food, has publicly credited deep planting and aggressive sucker pruning for his 30-pound per plant averages on heirloom varieties. A University of Florida study published in 2017 tested root volume in deep planted versus standard planted tomatoes and found the deep planted specimens developed root systems with surface area measurements 40 to 60% greater within the first 6 weeks after transplant. Now, let me walk you through the patterns I see most often that keep backyard tomato yields low. The first pattern is planting too shallow. I see folks buy a beautiful, healthy transplant, dig a hole just deep enough for the root ball, and call it good. Those plants will grow, they will produce, but they will never access what is actually available to them. The victory gardeners buried 2/3 of the stem because they understood tomatoes are not like peppers or squash. They are a vine that wants to root along its entire length. The second pattern is constant light watering. Folks set up a sprinkler that runs 10 minutes a day. That keeps the top 2 inches of soil damp and trains roots to stay there. When a heat wave hits, those surface roots cook. Water deeply, less often. The third pattern is skipping the mid-season feeding. Tomatoes are heavy feeders. A plant carrying 20 pounds of ripening fruit is pulling enormous amounts of potassium out of the soil. If you do not replace it, your yields collapse in late July. I did this myself for years and could not figure out why my August tomatoes were always disappointing. The fourth pattern is letting every sucker grow on an indeterminate plant. You end up with a tangled bush that sets fruit everywhere, but cannot size any of it. Pruning to 1 or 2 litres concentrates the plant's energy into fewer, larger fruits. Now here is the bonus I promised you at the start. The Victory Garden bulletins from 1943 mentioned, almost in passing, that many home gardeners sprayed a dilute aspirin solution on their tomato foliage every 2 to 3 weeks. The theory at the time was that it strengthened the plants against disease. Modern research has confirmed it does exactly that and more. So, salicylic acid, the active compound in aspirin, triggers what plant scientists call systemic acquired resistance. A 2018 study out of the University of Rhode Island found that tomato plants treated with a dilute aspirin foliar spray showed fruit set increases of up to 20% and significantly reduced early blight incidence. The recipe is simple. Dissolve 1 regular strength aspirin tablet, 325 milligrams, in 1 gallon of water. Add a single drop of dish soap as a surfactant. Spray the foliage until lightly wet early in the morning every 2 to 3 weeks, starting at first flower. That is it. 40 cents per season for a measurable bump in yields. What I showed you today is one piece of a much bigger approach to home food production. And if you're serious about growing significantly more food from the space you already have, the 30-day maximum yield protocol is the guide I put together to pull all of it into one place. It covers the full soil biology foundation that makes methods like this work, the strategic pruning systems for tomatoes and other heavy producers, the companion planting combinations victory gardeners use to stack yields in small spaces, the succession planting schedules that keep your beds producing from April through October, and the science behind every method so you know why each one works. 115 pages, $17, written for the backyard gardener who wants real results without buying more land or more equipment. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below. Harold, in his 1943 Dayton backyard, was not a genius. He was just a factory worker following a USDA bulletin that happened to be built on solid plant biology. The knowledge got buried when commercial agriculture took over, but the tomato plants have not changed. The science has not changed. Go dig a trench this spring, plant 1 tomato the old way, and leave 1 planted the new way right beside it. Come back and tell me in the comments which plant wins. I already know the answer.